so we want to make sure that we get as much in as we can in the time allotted here. The last 2 weeks, we've covered those things that are the appropriate things to develop a concise and effective and compelling story. And last week, Ann Puckett shared with us the 4 questions that should be answered in writing your story, so that those prospects that are listening, can have, some answers and insight up front before they learn more about Arbonne. It's their first real main touch point to learning more about the business. And so just to let you know what's going to happen tonight, I'm going to have Ann go over those 4 questions one more time. And then I'm going to add into it some information that we learned when we were down at the VP retreat a few weeks ago by Art Zonak, who is a key leader on various components of what you should say when you speak and the things that should be included in your story. And he evaluated Stacy Molly's story, my story, and 2 other people's stories, and shared insights into those things that should be included. And I'm going to go over that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Amy Barnes and Erin to share their stories with us. And if we have enough time, we're going to have Puckett do the same. And we're not going to just hear their story, but we're going to hear their before story, before they revised it with Ann's pointers on the 4 questions to include and what we learned at the training. And then they're going to give us their after story. And so then from there, we'll encourage you to take the information you learned here and take the time to kind of rewrite yours. And then, you can talk with your upline about getting some input on any changes that, we think that you should make based on what we've learned so far that has made a huge impact for us. So to get started, I'm going to turn it over to Ann real quick just to remind us again what we learned last week about the 4 questions that should be answered in your story. Ann.
Okay, great. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, everybody, for being on the call. So the 4 questions are, 1, how were you introduced to Arbonne? Was it through a sample? Was it through a party? Did you hear about it through a friend? Whatever. 2, what was your initial reaction? Most people, their initial reaction is not, I would like to do that business that you're talking about right this second. So there's probably something that for some reason you dismissed it. So what were those initial thoughts? You're too busy, you don't know anything about sales, whatever. What was your turning point? What was it that helped you shift in your thinking from that could not possibly be for me to maybe that is for me? And lastly, what successes have you seen and where are you going with the business yourself? Okay, so that's it, Karen.
Great. Thank you so much, Ann. So some of the additional things that we learned that are important components to include in your story are what I'm going to share with you now. The first being that it's really good to open with some kind of small story. Now, I know that our story is kind of a story in and of itself, right? But he suggested opening with a good story of some sort to kind of bring people in. And so he said it's good to have 2 to 3 different openings you can pull from, depending on the circumstances in which you'll be giving it. But we all know that in our business, most of the time when we're giving our story, it's when we're doing a group presentation at an in-home presentation or what have you. And so, have something that, can bring them in based on whatever you're going to lead them into, and then that turns into being a good close. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So some kind of good story. The second point that's important to have, in addition to these 4 questions being answered, is to try and pick one topic that you want to get across, one point you want to get across. And what I mean by that is one of the Arbonne features that you want to get across, or benefits of doing the business, rather. So what's the one lesson we want them to walk away with that is going to stay in their mind when they walk away? What is that one thing that you want them to remember? So is it that they can have more time and choose their own schedule? Is it that they can have more freedom to do what it is, what they choose with their life? Or is it more money? What is it, the thing that you want to share with them by doing the Arbonne business? And so the way that I went about doing that is I went through and picked out the key elements in my story that I was sharing and what were the benefits that were related to Arbonne from each of those points. So I would suggest if you have multiple points in your story that you share, that you kind of go through it and pick out those things. What is it? Is it time? Do each of these things give you more time, give you more money, or give you more freedom? And then that can be the main topic potentially that you relate back to threading it throughout your story, and that you want them to walk away from. And Then the last piece is that after you do your story, the last suggestion that he had is that you go through and you use 2 different color highlighters to break up your story based on, number one, content. Use one highlighter to highlight all the relevant content that pertains to your story and the takeaway that you want them to have. And then use the second highlighter to highlight anything that talks about me, us, I, your first person stuff. Because the point is, he was saying you don't want it to all be about you, but more about how can it be about a benefit to your audience. So as much as possible, if you can pull out the words I, me, us, and turn it back to them, would be helpful if possible. But we know that in telling our story, you can't eliminate the I from all of it. It's impossible. But the majority of it, he wants it to be something that they can relate to in their terms. Anne, or Amy, rather, do you have anything else to add to that, or Erin, before we move into sharing our stories?
No, I was just going to say that they will definitely hear the difference. I know in my story, the one that I've been saying for years, you'll hear a lot of I's in it. And that was one of the things that I thought was really powerful when we went through this exercise with everybody that was sharing. And the other thing that I know that he shared was trying not to, and I hate to use this word, but trying not to depress people with your sob stories, because, right, Karen?
Exactly.
I mean, exactly. Yeah, I mean, because we all have stuff that's going on, and sometimes we tend to, say, things that happen in our stories. But that was the other thing that I know that seemed to be a common thread throughout when we were doing this training also that he had shared with all of us. So just those couple points. Erin, Tanya, anything else that you can add from some of the information?
Yeah, Amy, I'm so glad you just said how, kind of how you have changed yours, and I know everybody's going to hear that in a second. I just wanted to add 2 things. The other thing that I took away from it, and this is how I changed my story, was what Art Jonak told us was, tell a story, make a point. Tell a story, make a point. And then you don't have to say to people, can any of you relate to that? Because as you're telling the story, you're going to see people nodding. You're going to see people like, oh my gosh, that sounds like my life. So you don't have to ask them if they can relate to it, but you want to tell your story in such a way that, yes, they can relate to it on some level. And then the last thing that I'm just going to add is we're doing this 2 weeks in a row, guys, because your I story is what sells the business opportunity. It's how you share the business opportunity. It keeps you relatable to your audience. And when you make these changes, and again, practice them with your upline and continue to hone it, but don't get overthinking it like, well, I can't do anything until my I story is perfect. But I will tell you that you will see people in the room nodding in a way that you haven't seen it before. And that's why we wanted to focus on this for 2 weeks, because it is such an important part of sharing. And clearly we're doing something right sponsoring, because you saw Laura's email that we were in the top Central Nation sponsoring. So, Amy, I'll turn it over to you to share your story.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And like Erin just said, this is definitely ever evolving. I mean, I know for me, I know Karen and I have worked together on this and looking at my story and picking out some of the highlights, and it's ever evolving. So is this the way it's going to be? This is where I am right now. This is what I'm practicing. And I know with my coming workshops this week and my one-on-ones that it will be ever-changing. But so I just wanted to share with you. I'm going to share with you my before story, and I'm sure some of you have heard this probably word for word, but I am going to read both of my stories to you so you can have an understanding of the before and the after. So this is my before. My name is Amy Barnes. I'm an independent consultant and regional vice president with Arbonne. I've been with Arbonne for 8 years. Prior to Arbonne, I was a kindergarten teacher in Howard County. In June of 2005, we decided I would stay home with my daughter, Kendall, who was 9 months old. As much as I wanted to be home, I also wanted something for myself. I am a type A personality and love to stay busy. I was introduced to Arbonne from a parent at my school because I was looking for a skincare line that would help with the dark spots on my face. I fell in love with the products instantly and was given information about the business. It always intrigued me, and I was looking for different ways to make extra money because I was tutoring 5 days a week, running a dance company, and also teaching a summer school. So I attended a business meeting and decided to jump in. I launched my business in 2005 and earned a Mercedes-Benz just 17 months after starting. I became an RVP in almost 6 months. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's amazing how life throws you curveballs. In 2007, I started trying to have another child. Well, that didn't happen very easily. I suffered from 4 years of horrific infertility. I was dropped from major clinics because I would bring down their statistics. I finally found a doctor who would take on patients that other clinics did not want. I was on and off drugs for 4 years, having disappointment after disappointment. Side note, you can hear the depression a little bit. I would not have been able to have a teaching position or any other job because the amount of time I was in appointments. In addition, the cost of the infertility. After all of this, our last try, we were able to get pregnant with our second daughter, Whitney. But my story doesn't end there. At delivery, I had an unforeseen condition that landed me in intensive care for 48 hours and losing 70% of my blood. But here's the amazing thing. I still received an Arbonne paycheck. I received a check for 3 months after trying to recover and having a new baby. What other company pays you for your efforts while still being home to take care of your family? Arbonne has offered me so many blessings, trips, jewelry, bigger home, Mercedes-Benz, but most of all, valuable friendship and time with my kids. So that's my before, and that's what I've been saying for quite a long time. But this is my after story. Have you ever thought that there was something else out there where you would be paid for what you're worth? Have you ever worked so hard but you're still living just with a little savings or paycheck to paycheck? Well, that was me 9 years ago. I was a kindergarten teacher in Howard County, and not only was I teaching and bringing work home, I was also tutoring 5 days a week, running a dance company, and teaching summer school. I was just trying to stay ahead of the bills, but no matter how much more I worked, it seemed like it was never enough and took more time away from my family. I constantly wondered if there could be a better way. In September of 2004, I was blessed with my first daughter, Calll. I went back to teaching after having her, but knew I'd be faced with some tough decisions about working and putting my daughter in daycare or not. My parents could help temporarily, but then we faced a big choice, daycare or the high cost of staying home. So we decided staying home was going to be the best option for us, knowing that we would have to make other sacrifices with less income coming in. But I had something stirring inside of me that knew that there was something else out there for me. Have you ever felt that way? Well, enter Arbonne into my life. I was introduced to Arbonne from a sample pack and fell in love. It had completely changed my skin. I had decided to look into the business so I would have some extra money while being home with her. By following the simple system for success, I saw how many others before me had achieved similar goals and realized that this was truly the right fit for my family. I jumped right in. 17 months after starting my business, I was able to replace my teaching income and earn the Mercedes-Benz, which is the company car that you reach at the highest level of management. How amazing was it to earn income that replaced multiple jobs, but with far less time? Fast forward, my husband and I wanted more children, but the road was tough, extremely consuming, and expensive. 4 years of difficult infertility treatments filled with exhaustion and many emotional lows can take its toll. Do you know or have you ever known anyone suffering from a condition like this? If Arbonne was not in my life, I would not be able to take the time off to go undergo treatments over such a long period of time, or could we afford the cost? And we would not be blessed with another beautiful daughter. But now we are. Arbonne is truly a gift. Arbonne has blessed my life in so many ways with time and financial freedom. I encourage you to take a look because this could be your plan A or your plan B.
Amy, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
There you go.
So I wish I could open this up for everyone to talk at this point. I would love to have everyone's input on what they heard as the main takeaway as the Arbonne benefit. What I took from it is that Arbonne has allowed Amy's family to have the freedom of choices. You know, she actually has all three: freedom of choice for her schedule. She has more time and had more time to do the things that she was wanting to do, like the fertility treatments and other things, and had the money to be able to afford those things and to be able to live as they wanted to live without her having to work multiple jobs. So really, she had the benefit of all three. I also noticed in her story that she took out the RVP title, that she had earned the RVP title by a certain point. And one of the points we learned when we were away is that while so early on when we're sharing our story with people that they don't necessarily understand the acronyms for business and don't understand what that means and what level that is and all that sort of thing. And so that's why Amy tweaked hers a little bit to say that she was able to replace her income within a certain period of the time as opposed to calling it by a title. And then she also took out some of the points that might have sounded a little bit more depressing, a little more factual now as opposed to depressing. So I thought she did really
well.
well.
And I feel like when when you hear it the first time, it's all I. I did this. This is, and when you actually take a step back and you listen to it, you realize that it's when you're in an environment where you're sharing your story and all you're doing is talking about yourself, that could give the wrong impression to your guests.
Sure. And so we all need to continue tweaking it, as Amy and Erin
Mm-hmm.
said. But I think that this is definitely a step in the right direction, and it's much improved from where it was. And
Yep.
we're going to continue learning and growing and sharing our stories with each other and how we can improve them. So thank you so much, Amy, for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Before I introduce Erin to have her do the same, Tanya, did you have any other input you wanted to share, or did I accidentally meet you out?
Nope, I'm here, and no, it's fantastic. I love the difference, and I think you guys are hitting all the great points. So to help us keep on track, I'll stop at that. Way to go, guys.
Thank you, Tanya. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Erin to share her before and after as well.
Okay, great. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So this is my before story. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Harrigan. I'm an independent consultant and regional vice president with Arbonne. And I was introduced to Arbonne 4 years ago through a sample pack of our incredible RE9 anti-aging line. I fell in love with the results after having used another skincare line for over 10 years, and I signed up that night for the biggest discount as a consultant. However, when my friend suggested I take a look at the business, I said, no way. I am too busy. I don't know anybody that's ever made money at one of these types of businesses, and I knew my friends would think I was nuts. You see, I was a corporate executive with a flexible schedule making a six-figure salary, so why on earth would I do something like this? However, I was miserable because I was traveling about 70% of the time, having to miss my kids' activities, and I was at the beck and call of a boss who expected me to be available on weekends and on vacation, but I was stuck because the only choice I knew was finding a new job if I wanted to change anything. We couldn't live without my salary, yet no job would give me the time that I longed for. What changed my mind was when my 10-year-old daughter begged me not to travel one Sunday evening. You see, when I traveled, it means my husband had to take her to a family friend's home at 5 a.m. to be taken to school. She shared with me that it was scary to be the only one awake in the house when he took her there, and that broke my heart. I decided to put my corporate ego aside and start building a business part-time alongside my life to eventually replace my salary. Fast forward 14 months into my business, I promoted to RVP, and then a year later, I was downsized out of nowhere. Thankfully, we were prepared for impact because of this business. Then in September of 2013, my husband was furloughed for 15 days, and he was not paid for that time. Again, thanks to Arbonne, we were able to cover what he was missing, and I don't know how we could have done that otherwise. I don't know where you may be in your life right now, but maybe you'd like more time with your family like I did, or maybe an extra $500 to $1,000 a month would make a difference to your family because there's too much month at the end of your money. Maybe you've been wanting to build a business asset that will help you build a financial wall around yourself and your family. If this sounds like your life, and if anything I shared tonight sounds intriguing, I invite you to take a look and learn a little bit more. This may or may not be for you, but you deserve to make an informed decision. I am looking for 2 people that I can teach and train and mentor on our road to the top of this company. And maybe that's you, or maybe you know someone that fits that description. So that was my before story, and I kind of combined some different versions of my I story. But here's my after story from what we were trained on and what we've been talking about. 3.5 years ago, I was an overscheduled wife, mom, employee, and volunteer. Every Sunday night, I had a pit in my stomach as I looked toward the week ahead, wondering how I could keep everybody on track and keep my head above water. I was under tremendous pressure at my job, like a migraine that just won't go away. The kind that makes everything in your life blurry, like the world is moving at warp speed and you just can't seem to catch your breath. On Sunday evening in August, we were preparing for the week ahead And it was a familiar routine that we followed every time I traveled for work. I told my 13-year-old she needed to get herself up and get out the door in the morning because I was leaving at 4 a.m. for my 5:30 train to New Jersey, and her father would be taking her sister to a friend's house at 5 a.m. so she could get to school. I told my 10-year-old to be sure to have everything ready and to set her alarm early enough because she and Daddy would be leaving at 5 a.m. She came to me with tears in her big blue eyes and begged me not to go. Please don't go, Mommy. I don't want to go to Aunt Steve. I explained again that I had to go because my job paid for the house and piano lessons and all the things that we love to do, and all she had to do was curl up on the couch with a blanket and a pillow and just go back to sleep. But she said, Mommy, it's scary to be there so early in the morning. It's dark. No one is up. Please don't go. It simply broke my heart. But we were a dual-income family living a dual-income life, and despite many conversations about making some kind of change, we just didn't see any choice except for the corporate path that we had been on. It was all that we knew. As I went to bed with that pit in my stomach and that pressure in my head of being told I wasn't worth what I was being paid and expected to work weekends and vacations, I remembered the words that my friend Eileen had shared with me 4 months earlier when she introduced me to Arbonne through a sample pack of our anti-aging line. I fell in love with the results, and I remembered her saying to me, if you keep doing what you're doing, where will you be in 5 years? And if you keep doing what you're doing, how will your outcome be any different? At the time, I gave her a big no way because I couldn't fit one more thing into my already overscheduled life. I didn't know anyone that actually made money in a business like this, and I knew my friends would think I'd hit rock bottom. But this time, on that Sunday night, I also remember being intrigued about what this business could give me in the way of time and financial support. Oh, I'm sorry, I lost my place. That was my turning point. And maybe tonight is your turning point. I don't know where you may be in your life right now, but maybe you'd love to have more time with your family. Maybe you'd love to choose how to spend every day. Maybe an extra $500 would make a difference to your family because there's too much month at the end of the money. Or maybe you always thought you'd be in a different place in your life by now, and you've got big dreams that deserve your time and attention. I share this with you not to impress you, but to impress upon you that this opportunity could be what gives you the future that you're looking for. This may or may not be for you, but I invite you to take a look because you could be right for our growing global team, and Arbonne could be right for you. Following our simple system that gave me tracks to run on, working part-time alongside my job, I reached a level of leadership in 14 months that enabled me to equal 2/3 of my income. And it came just in time because a year later, I was downsized suddenly, and despite my hard work, my salary, my health insurance, and my 401k contributions stopped. I am forever grateful that I had Arbonne to save us from that. Maybe this is a ray of hope that you've been looking for. And tonight, when I meet with each of you to see what your individual needs may be, if anything you've heard intrigues you, take home some information and consider how this opportunity could change your life.
Erin, that was awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm sure that you all heard the differences between the two. There was, while there were similarities between the two, you said you did pull from your old story, which, makes a lot of sense. There were so many differences. It was actually hard for me to keep track of all the changes that you made, and all the changes were so positive. Some of the things I took away from it, and I'm sure others heard as well, is, the beginning of your story now was more of a story about yourself as opposed to the way you had done it previously. Also, you took out the title, so you didn't use the acronyms anymore that aren't familiar to people, not in our business. So it was more about what you achieved and how that related to your life as opposed to RVP. There was so much more emotion in your story. You used a lot of verbs and descriptions that really pull people in and then get them engaged. You also talked about the path to success, that you can give people tracks to run on, or you saw that by doing this business that you wouldn't be alone, that there's a system for success, and that you could plug right in, and also how you described how the business was offered to you and how you reacted to it. You changed that in a way too that I think is something that people can relate to. Before it was like, wow, I said no way, I'm not interested in this business, blah blah blah. Now the way that you changed it, it seems like it would make it appealing to people that were feeling the same way you did, like kind of like, hey, there's tracks to run on, I can get right in, I can plug right in. It seemed like you were as turned off as you were the first time when, oh, no way, I would never do that. The language that you used, and it was really clear about all the benefits that Arbonne offers. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add, but this isn't, the kind of place that we can, unfortunately, we can't take that kind of feedback. So, the next thing I'd love to do is have Anne come back on because she has a couple more things to share before we wrap up. So, Anne.
Hi. Okay, great. There's so much fun hearing about changes and hearing both of your stories, so thank you for sharing those. I didn't hear the training that you guys are talking about, so I don't know if you just mentioned something like this, but I feel like once you have your iStory down as far as all the components and all the elements, then the next thing is working on your delivery and how you share it. And certainly in the beginning, if you feel that you need to have it in front of you so that you can, keep track of what you're saying and you don't go off track, that's helpful. But the most powerful stories are going to be the ones that you share while you're able to look up and make eye contact with your guests and speak as if you're talking off the cuff, even though you're not, because you've got your plan in your head of what you're going to say. It's very carefully thought out, but at the same time, it sounds as if you're just talking. And so that was my goal. That was what I wanted to be able to do, is be able to just remember all the things I wanted to say, but at the same time deliver it in a way that felt authentic, and I could be passionate, and I could talk and make eye contact with people instead of having to read it. So the tip I wanted to offer for people is once you've got it typed up and you've kind of got it down and you've got the elements of what you want to make sure to say, then I really want to expand on the idea of recording it and listening to yourself, because I had like an hour and 15-minute drive to my party yesterday, and so I decided I was going to do it, just spend the whole time working on my iStory, and there's nobody in the car, it's just me, and I just used my iPhone and I recorded myself, and I went back and listened to it, and I was like, oh my God, that's not funny, I got to make a change there, that doesn't sound good. It didn't sound good to hear it. I mean, it sounded good, when it looked good to me when I had read the typed words on my paper, but it sounded different when I listened to the words and the way it came out. So, and as I kept going through it and making changes, and it was time consuming because it was like an hour, but when I was making changes and making it sound more like me, like the way I talk, it sounded more like the real me instead of like a typed up version of me. So by the time I got there, I had said it so many times, I had it completely memorized, but it didn't sound memorized or repeated that way. So I said, this is the first time in the 7 years I've been with Arbonne that I felt like I delivered a really good iStory and a really good close. And I know it's because, I saw the heads nodding. I saw people saying, I never thought about that way. I talked to people at checkout, and I said, have you ever thought about something like this? And they were like, I heard what you were saying. That really didn't make sense. I've never really had results like that quickly. So I really want to say, take the time to record it and listen to yourself. And if the file went so big, I was going to email the file to Laura and say, will you listen to me and see what you think about it, and get some feedback, but it was too big. So anyway, that's just the tip I wanted to offer, so that you can not only have the elements, but also work on a good delivery too.
Thank you so much, Anne. That's really helpful. I do believe that all of us have worked on doing similar things. We may not have recorded it. I know that I timed mine. I'm still trying to get mine shorter, because we want to try and keep it down to 3 minutes or around 3 minutes, but sometimes it's hard to do that, especially if we have a good amount of content to share. But that's such a helpful piece of information or a piece of advice, and thank you. I'm going to actually do that myself because I've only timed mine. But I think Erin's done the same thing, and I think she said that made a big difference for her, too. The other thing I'll share with you all is that there is a document in Mars Nation's webpage that talks about, how to effectively put together your iStory, and we're going to be updating that over the next week or so to include the elements that we talked about this evening. And then I would just encourage you all to take those elements that are in there and take the time to go through yours and see if you can make some modifications to it, and then work with your upline. Send it to them, get their input, work with them to get it to a point where it's delivering, the most impactful and concise message to those that are hearing from you possible. So real quick, Amy, Erin, Tanya, and anything else to share before we wrap up tonight?
No, thank you, Karen.
No, thank you. Great. Well, thank you all for taking the time to be on the call tonight. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and look forward to hearing your revised iStory soon. Have a great night.
Thank you.